Hi, I'm Kennedy Call.
And I'm Saydi Bowen.
And this week we read in the school book, The Story of American Public Education, Part 3, Why Don't You Go to School With Us, which was pages 131 to 170. So to start, this section talked a lot about reform for separated groups that have been historically excluded in schools or separated from other groups. And from the 1950s to the 70s, there was a big wave of reform that led activists and parents and students to band together to create more equality in the school systems. And they really fought for legislation to pass to bring all of these more marginalized groups together in the classroom. And this modern fight for equality began in Topeka, Kansas, and it was hinged on the issue of race. And this is commonly known because it's the Brown versus Board of Education. And the decision for this was on May 17, 1954. Chief Justice Earl Warren said in a unanimous decision that separate was not equal, and how they needed to have students of all races be in the classroom together, and that these opportunities needed to be shared between all the groups, and that it wasn't right for separation to occur. And so that's kind of the start of the idea of integrating the classrooms as the communities became more integrated as well, to lead for more progress.
So outside of school, there was a lot more integration than there was like inside the classroom in school. Like families and students, like kids mostly, would play together of all races, but inside schools then they were still going to separate schools and had separate school activities like student governments and dances and everything, which was strange to them because they were playing together outside of school. And even after Brown versus Board of Education, there was still 98% of Black students that went to all Black student schools. It still was not very integrated at the beginning of,
So another thing was that when President Lyndon Johnson came into the presidency, this was a really big thing for education because he was actually a former teacher who worked with students in Texas who were Mexican Americans. And so he had seen diversity in the classroom actually in play. And so he really, really worked to equalize the schools, to bring integration and to help have the schools be as inclusive as possible and avoid segregation. And he created a wide range of federal programs to integrate the schools and to bring these more marginalized groups together. Such as Head Start programs and also low-cost college funding, so that students could get the highest education possible despite their backgrounds. Another thing was that he felt so passionately about this that he did threaten that if the schools weren't to integrate, he would cut their funds. And because funding is so important, all activities hinge on that. They really, really valued the funds. And so they oftentimes were much better at integration during Johnson's presidency because they were really forced into it. But that made progress in our school system.
Yeah, he was super great. He really helped with school integration. By the end of his presidency, or by 1972, 91% of Southerners finally had the schools had integrated. So that was really awesome. So once schools integrated, a lot of people had the same education available, but they didn't all have equal opportunities within education. An example of this is the Mexican Americans. While they were able to go to the schools that everyone else was going to, they were still told oh no, you can't be this profession or do this because of your race or whatever. So they were still pushed down a lot because of that. And so they protested for better opportunities because they did not think it was fair that they were being told they couldn't do certain academic things because of their race. And finally, due to their protesting, they were able to get some Mexican Americans on the school board. which they really felt was a good start for them. And so then after their protest, they decided to go back to school, and they did start to see slow changes in their opportunities and everything. So the schools did slowly, after Johnson, start to do a lot better at including everyone and giving everyone equal opportunities, which is good.
Yeah. Another group that was focused on in this section was students with disabilities, because at this time they were actually separated into schools for the blind or for the deaf, and other things like that. And so it made it difficult for them to have the same education, because as we had already seen from separation by race, separate and equal is not possible. It's going to be unequal. And so they were really fighting to be able to gain this equality by having integration. And they really worked to be included. And there was a lawyer named J. Hubert who made the comment that in the book that because they fought so hard, now students with disabilities are is one of the marginalized groups that has the most rights that are being protected in schools, because it was such a successful push to gain these rights, and those laws are more enforced today than most other equalizing laws that are put in place.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, the final thing it talked about in this chapter was women's rights. Title IX was passed, and the women got a lot more opportunities to do things. Like they started having women's sports teams and everything, and women were able to go to more schooling than they were able to before, and more than half of the undergrad and master's degrees that were being earned now in the later 1900s were by women. So just to show that they really had an impact on that. So that was kind of the summary of the chapter.
Yeah, so now we're going to move on to the praxis section. So in my classroom, I really want to focus on inclusion and of all races, genders, and disabilities, that everyone feels that they have a place in our classroom and that everyone is getting the most help that they need to have that equality be put into place, because every student should feel that they're being treated fairly and that they're being given the most opportunity to learn in the best environment and situation that works for them. Also in my classroom, just being able to focus on providing my students with the tools they need to succeed is going to be really important. And just like the figure that we looked at in class, fair is not always equal, in this idea that some students are going to need more help from me and other students aren't going to need the same kinds of helps that some students might need. And so making sure that I find ways to help all my students, but also be able to give those students that need more of that help to have the equality be in place so that everybody can get the best education possible.
Similar to that, in my classroom, I want to make sure that all kids have an equal opportunity to learn, like we've discussed a lot, because I want to make sure that race or gender, as talked about a little bit in this subject, I don't want it to have to do with their education. Like, I think we all need to learn as one and be united, especially in the classroom. So I think that's really important. I also think it's really important that that students are met where they are in my classroom, and everyone gets a chance to learn and feel like they're being understood from where they're at. This chapter also talked a little bit about bilingual students, how they how they started to make bilingual text and stuff. So I want to make sure kids who do speak a different language know that they're being understood in the classroom and that they have a place there. Mostly I just want to make sure kids in my classroom, know that they have the chance to excel and do their best despite race or gender or any of these prejudices that the chapters have been talking about, that there is a space for them to learn and they're safe there and can do the best that they can. So
that's perfect. I really liked what you said about the bilingual students. Now, just to reflect, something interesting that I found was the quote from President Johnson that said, an equal chance at education meant an equal chance at life. and how firm he believed in that. And I just think that as educators, it's so important that we really are working on helping our students get to the best path in life possible. Circumstances are 100% there and they exist, but there are things that we can do to help them get the best chance they can to move beyond those circumstances, and be able to learn and grow and see ways that they can do more than they thought they maybe could, and being the educators that are going to push them and encourage them to do those things, so that we have equality in our school systems and that nobody feels that they're being left out or pushed out or separated because of gender, race, or disability.
Yeah, I really love that quote. It's a good one. But when you look at it, what I was thinking about after reading this chapter is how far we really have come, though. From the beginning of the 1900s, when it was only men going to school and white Americans, and they only went, not even all of them got to go. Only a select few got to pursue a higher education. And in this chapter, I think it really showed how we have come such a far way, even just through the end of the 1900s, how women are finally going to school and the segregation has gotten so much better. And I just thought it was really interesting and awesome how far our school systems have come and how much more integration there has been now. So
yeah.